Speech 3, Abrahamism versus Samuelism, Part 2. By the name of my God, whom is only God of his true prophet. My name is Sayyid Muhammad Ali Meraji, and as long as I am alive, I am the only God prophet. After me, my next is my last born, and he is in charge. I believe in a live God and a live prophet as necessities of the live planet. This speech is continuation of Abrahamism versus Samuelism Part 1. In first speech, I have introduced myself as God only prophet, and second speech is part 1 of this speech. Watching these two videos or reading their text is necessity before you continue with this speech. Before I start the speech, I like to say some words about my earlier speeches. I am not good in English, and it is visible in my videos. It is because neither language is my strong side, nor expect high school I took any English. I know near to nothing about English grammar. I do not live in an English language country to get used to use English either. I started to learn English by watching American movies. I was lazy to read movies under text in Danish, so I had to learn to listen and understand them. But learning a language to understand movies is much a smaller problem compared with using it to write or use it to talk. I have started to write in English since I have opened today's UN12.com. I did not want to write in Farsi or Danish because I wanted everyone on board to be able to read my words. So I had to write in English. English of my first statement is terrible, but since I have started to use text reader programs, I think I write much better in English. I cannot talk in English as good as I can write it because once I made some speeches in English, but my YouTube videos are my only work in recent years. Therefore, it may take a while before I get better to talk in English. It happens a lot that I use wrong sentence structure or I use wrong words, while there are many words in English which explain what I want to say much better. I even use for, as, in, to, and etc. sometimes wrongly. Doubtless my weakness in English damages the importance of what I talk about in my videos. I know this problem, but I can't do anything about it now. I must learn correct English, and I do that if I ever get time for it. Until then, for now, recently I have included text to my first two videos to make them more understandable. Because of my bad English, watching my videos only once is not enough. If you have time, I ask you to watch my videos more than once. If you still have difficulty in understanding it, you can read videos text in UN12.com. As well, you are always welcome to contact me for more explanations. You can find my email in UN12.com. Surely, I make many sentences which are not correct English sentences. But grammatically correct English speech is not my main goal or concern. I make these speeches to talk about most important matters, which are concern of everyone in present time, as it was concern of everyone in past time, and as it will be concern of man of future. Only what I talk about is what I want you to get out of my videos, not how bad I say it in English. And if you are good in English and you have extra time, I'll be grateful to you if you listen and read my words in these speeches, and after you understood what I was going to say, write it down in correct English and email it for me. That will be a great help, and I will be thankful to you. In part 1 of the speech, I brought a harsh example to show difference between Abrahamism and Samuelism. On that example, I have used beautiful woman as main character and object of example because God's prophets have one thing in common with beautiful women, and that is being beside something that everybody wants. I have said Abrahamism is not only to abuse her himself, but also is to keep her down to be able to sell her to other abusers, while Samuelism is to make her his queen. This example was good enough to show Abrahamism have most wrong intentions and Samuelism has the most good intentions. But example must not be taken literally because main character of example was a woman, and according to Samuelism, she could be king's wife. While God prophets are not for becoming anyone's wife. God prophets themselves must become king and king of their believers. Case is not different for child or female God prophet either. She must be king over everyone except for her husband in privacy. I have as well brought a saying from Jesus. It was his words about that man who gave his money to 3 of his trustees. First, in text of this example, I wrote Torah as you see in the text, while it is Torah in New International Version of Bible. But as I ask you, don't be critical about my English. Second, in this example, I did not clear whom am I talking about, whom am I referred to as those 3 trustees, as those 3 Abrams. The 3 Abrams or trustees are Jew, Christians, and Muslims. Third, prophets were not that money that we gave by own will to Jew, Christians, or Islam, but prophets are those whom they took from us in the last 3,000 years. Jew, Christians, and Muslims are well aware that I am here in front of you. But they are not only gave anything in return for what they took from us in the last 3,000 years, but also they all cooperate in me getting abused like all other prophets. Some of them even tried to send me to India to make themselves another wealth through me, and gave me and my next 1,000 more years in India. Then take India, divide it to small kingdoms and share it among themselves, and send me to get them another wealth. It is what they did with Christianity and Islam and some other big countries. And it is their only goal out of their trust in God, trust in prophets, trust in religions, and trust in books by their Abrahamists. In other hand, they are all Jew, Christians, or Muslims. They have all Torah, Bible, and Quran. But what they pray and worship all the days, what does it solve for them? They all suffer of my floods, my earthquakes, my storms, drought, and hunger. All of them know themselves God believers and worshippers, but they only fool themselves or are to fool others with their belief. Fact is that there are still many big countries in the world. Be sure they have already planned how to take over these countries by abuse of God prophets and God powers and their own corruptions. I'm sure that they are even using each of my catastrophes in benefit of their plans, to divide these countries to small kingdoms and make themselves kings over each part of it. It is an interesting subject, but I am not to talk about it here. Now let us start with the speech. I start with Abram in Bible, But before I go to verses, I have to explain some importance about God prophets. There are many important about a God prophet, important things. Therefore, verses remain for future parts of speech. I start with Genesis 11, from Genesis 11:27, Abram's family. Title of this part in New International Version is Abram's family, while Abram is not mentioned as the most important and specific character of subject anywhere in its verses. There is not such a title in my Persian Bible, and if it is only naive which like to give a name to this part, I hope either they remove it to keep unity of our Bibles, or at least change it to Terah's family. Because verses are about Terah's family, not Abram. I start with telling how many children Terah had. It says what Terah has done. It starts with telling how many children Terah had. It says what Terah has done. It clear who is God's next prophet after Terah, and end with Terah's death. These are the most important about God prophet, and it is Bible tradition to mention it. Let's see whom has God introduced as most important persons in these verses. Terah is the first one. After Terah, verses mention mostly Lot and his father Haran and Haran's daughters as the most important characters after Terah. Abram, Sarai, and Nahor are mentioned only as secondary characters. Secondary characters are those whom has got mentioned only because in one or another way they were in relation with important characters. Most of verses end with mentioning who was the important person whom has caused mentioning the secondary character. This can be seen in Genesis 11:28, 29, 30, and 31. All end with the important character, while the unimportant character, the secondary character, is mentioned first, and sentence and verse end with mentioning the important character. Only Genesis 11:30 is exception. Abram is only mentioned in 3 verses, and in all 3 verses Abram is a secondary character. In 2 of verses Abram is mentioned as son of Terah, and in last one together with Sarai as husband of Sarai, where there was talk about Haran's daughters as main characters. Well, subject was about Terah. Let's see who was Terah, what was Terah's past, what Terah was doing. Terah's way was moving away to where which God and his prophet be free from getting ruled by others, where God prophet can be head and leader of his people, where instead of getting ruled on, God and his prophet rule. Only God prophet's kingdom is God's kingdom. No other ruling can be called God ruling. Not even the one which God prophet support or is even totally under his command. Israel or Jacob, the prophet, was the second Terah. He took his family and moved from Lebanon. Moses was himself the third Terah. He took his people and moved out of Egypt. Imam Hussein, grandson of Muhammad the Prophet, was the fourth Terah. He took his people and moved out, but enemy attacked him and he and his people got killed, and Abram, the enemy, took over his next. Both Israel and Moses are of most popular prophets. Imam Hussein is of most popular imams at Shia Muslims too. So they must have done something right. What Israel, Moses, and Imam Hussein did is exactly what Torah did. So Torah's path was not a right path. Now there come these questions. Is it really necessary for a God prophet to be the ruler? Why God prophets do not like to get ruled on like any other normal member of society? What can be wrong with God prophets getting ruled on? Why God prophet cannot live normal like any other member of their society? Why God prophets should always want to be king and rule, or try to avoid getting ruled on by others? Well, one of the things that Moses is to say with telling about Abram is answer to overtold questions. Moses with Abram indirectly tell you what can go wrong when others are ruler over God prophet. Even your own uncle cannot be king and ruler over you. If we want to know what need or force or qualify God prophets to be ruler, not a ruler, a highest leader, not a follower, a highest commander and not a command taker, we must find out in what case a God prophet is different than any other in this planet. If we want to know what makes God prophets unique and totally different with others, what exactly qualifies them, we must know who is he, we must know who is a God prophet and what is unique about him. We must know what is his capabilities. We must exactly know what a specific need or force or qualify God prophet to be the king, the ruler, the highest leader, and the decision maker. We start with who is he? Well, as the book says, the first one was Adam. His last born Seth was the next prophet after Adam. And so to the famous ones like Moses, Jesus, or Muhammad, and the rest until me. And after me, it will be my last born, and so after him. Surely since Adam, by now, each prophet had his own character, personality, meanings, opinions, and every other strengths and weaknesses that a man can have like any other ordinary man in this planet. Surely since Adam, some of prophets were of the most strong and some of them were of the most weak. But it is neither strengths nor weaknesses which make anyone God prophet. To become a God prophet, you must be born as one. Being a God prophet is what you inherit. It is not earnable or dependable to your strengths or weaknesses. In other words, who is the prophet, or what is prophet's strengths or weaknesses, character or personality or knowledge cannot be the reason behind prophets being qualified or their need to be on top. While at any other normal man mentioned are main qualifying reasons behind making him a leader. Now let's look at God prophet's capabilities. Let's find out what common capability make all God prophets qualified and forced to be the king and or ruler, regardless of their strengths or weaknesses. God prophets' common capability is that they inherit God from their prophet father and leave God for the last born by their death. Now let's see what prophet inherit by inheriting God from his father. What God do for his prophet. When a prophet inherit God, God become him. What does mean God become him? What does mean God becomes prophet? It means his success become God's success, and his fail become God's fail. His happiness become God's happiness, and his sadness become God's sadness. His needs become God's needs, and his satisfaction become God's satisfaction. His mood become God's mood, and his love become God's love. What he owns is what God owns, and what he gets is what God gets. What he wants, wish or dream about become what God wants. His victory become God's victory, and his lose become God's lose. And so everything else about him become God's. Well, God has done all about himself, all about his prophet. But what does it mean for others? How it affects others' lives? It means whomever obeys him has obeyed God, and whomever disobeyed him has disobeyed God. Whomever fight for him, fight for God, and whomever fight with him is fighting with God. Whomever kill for him has killed for God, and whomever get killed for him has got killed for God. Whomever kill of his has killed of God. Whomever get killed by him or his has got killed by God. Whomever welcome him welcomed God, and whomever reject him has rejected God. Whomever was useful for him was useful for God, and whomever was useless for him was useless for God. Whomever was his real friend was friend of God. Whomever is his enemy is enemy of God. Whomever harmed him has harmed God. Whomever get used or even get abused by him has got used by God, and whomever abused him has abused God. Whomever offered to him has offered to God, and whomever take away from him has taken away from God. Whatever he has got offered to is whatever God has got offered to. Whomever has helped him has helped God. Whomever guided him to his benefit was useful for God, and whomever has found him foolish or fooled him was to find God foolish. And finally, we reach where that clear that God prophets must be king and ruler. Whomever gets ruled by him is ruled by God, and whomever rule over him rule over God. Whomever he is his king, live in kingdom of God. And whomever make himself king over him was to make himself king over God. Whomever he command, God has commanded, and whomever command him was to command God. Whomever he make decision for has got decided over by God, and whomever decide over him was to decide over God. And so all the rest about him is all the rest about God. It is all over told that qualify a God prophet to be king and ruler. It is overtold capabilities which you cannot find at any other except God prophets. Simply say, God is on top himself, God has made himself him, so he must be on top in this planet to make God able to be on top and rule over this planet through his chosen. You must not mistake and think that by I overtold I say prophets are God. Not at all. Only God is God. No man can ever become God. But God can become his prophet or every other man. Remember this sentence because it is main subject of discussion. No man can become God, but God can become his prophet or every other man. It is God who take his prophet as himself. It is God who make all about his prophet all about himself. God himself is needless. If you have a big company or you have a fabric owner, you may hire a leader to run it for you. In the first day, when you introduce your new leader to your employees, you say whatever he say and order you to do is whatever I say and I order you to do. His leadership is your leadership, and so whatever income he make is your income. God is the same with his prophet as you are with your hired leader. Expect God does not need any sort of economic or not economic income out of this planet. But both his prophet and all people in this planet does. Some people think God has a sort of need of people know him and worship him for what he gave them. But they are totally wrong in knowing God. God does not have any need at all. All 6 million people on earth know him and worship him or not does not make any difference for God. God, known or unknown, worshipped or not worshipped, God is all God as he is and he always have been. But God prophets has needs, but all people in earth has needs. And disappointedly, all whom abuse prophets and their God has needs. God is needless, but we are not. And our needs need power and ability to reach and get them satisfied. God, by making himself his prophet, give him God powers to satisfy his needs. Here I have to bring a harsh example to give you a clue about both subject of discussion and size of what I am talking about. Disappointedly, it happened a lot that a country's king or ruler brought down from power by revolution of people of that country. But neighbor countries' kings or rulers or big powers rulers disappointedly are with him. He was their man there. They become him and attack his country for him. He himself is no one and has no power since he has thrown out of and removed from his power. But his supporter countries have, and they use their power to revenge for him, and they try to bring that country's people a knee for him. This has happened a lot in history, and it was the most dark and destructive thing in history against people of every nation. When ruler a country, by his country become you become capable as that country capable of. You get beside as big military and non-military force as that country is beside. Case is the same for God prophets at God. One of God's visible powers in this planet is a planet-wide sky, which is over everyone around this planet, and God earth which everyone live in it. Will all need a type of sky above which allowed you to live under it, and so the earth. When God become his prophet, God get his prophet beside biggest power existing. In overtold, real but disappointing example, supporter countries support the removed king or ruler by their weapons and warriors. God as well armed his prophet by his mentioned powers, by making himself him. God, by making himself his prophet, make his prophet most capable and dangerous living weapon. For example, whenever I see a young and very beautiful girl, sun start to shine more strongly, weather become better, and whenever I lose a girl, it become earthquake. Now you know that God prophets are not simple God messengers as many want them as, or disappointedly has got this wrong idea about God prophets from books and religions. No, in fact, every God prophet is most capable and dangerous living weapon. But disappointedly, it is what which abusers want to obscure or hide from both people and God prophet himself, while themselves do nothing but trying to get hand on God prophet's weapons. They either put God prophet under pressure themselves or support and cooperate whomever has got God prophet in chain and is to get hand on his weapons. Well, it is enough for this video. YouTube has allowed me to put more than 15 minutes, but I'd rather to keep it in a small parts. Next speech is continue of this speech. Since God prophets are living weapons, I start the next speech with common weaknesses of weapons and how these weaknesses can have effect on God prophets' lives and needs. Thank you for listening to me.